What is up, my friends? I'm finally back from my extended break and we're picking things up right where we left off by making the giant red bean buns from Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away. To start today's recipe, we're gonna make our own encore. This is basically the same recipe I used in the Soufflé Leger de Grace episode, which you can check out by clicking the I in the top right corner. Into a medium saucepan, we're adding in 150 grams of dried red beans that have been rinsed and drained. To the beans, I'm then adding enough water to submerge them by about 10 centimeters. Turn the stove onto a high heat and bring the beans up to a rolling boil. Then once the water has come up to the boil, we can drop the heat down to low and let them simmer away for roughly 1 hour to 90 minutes. During that time, if a lot of scum and foam forms on the surface of your beans, you can skim that off, but if there's not that much forming like what you see here, it's not that big of a deal if you want to skip this step. After about 80 minutes, this is what my beans look like. They're still very hot, so I wouldn't recommend using your bare hands to do this, but they're now completely cooked and easily mashed when pressed with your delicate little fingers. So once your beans reach this point, you can take them off the heat. With the beans now cooked, we're going to drain them through a sieve, making sure to reserve some of that cooking water for later. Let the beans hang out for about 10 minutes to dry out and use that time to clean your saucepan because we are going to need to use that again very shortly. To our now freshly cleaned saucepan, we're going to add back in our drained and cooked red beans along with 50 to 75 grams of white sugar. Turn the heat onto a medium-low and begin mixing the beans and sugar until the sugar has fully dissolved and the beans begin to break down into a jammier consistency. When that has been achieved, we can add in another 50 to 75 grams of sugar depending on how sweet you'd like your red bean paste and stir that through again until, like before, the sugar is completely dissolved and your red bean paste gains a beautiful sheen to it like this. Now at this point, if you want a chunky red bean paste, you don't need to do anything else to this except for transferring it into a container to cool down until you're ready to use it. However, in the movie, it looks like the buns use a smooth red bean paste, which means that we're going to process this with our stick blender. Transfer the contents of the pan into another jug, I'm only doing this because my stick blender has a metal base and it scratches the coating of my saucepan, and begin processing it with the stick blender until it's nice and smooth. If you find that your paste isn't getting smooth enough to your liking and it looks a bit too thick, just add in a few tablespoons of the reserved cooking water and continue to blend it. Adjust the water as needed until it becomes nice and smooth. Then once you're happy with the consistency of the bean paste, transfer it into a shallow container with lots of surface area and spread it out into a nice even layer. Let this sit out for about 10 minutes to cool down and then cover it with plastic wrap before transferring it into the fridge to cool down until it's needed. While that's hanging out, we can make our bao dough. For our buns, we're using the exact same recipe that was used in my Pixar Bao episode. Feel free to check that out later by clicking the I in the top right corner. Into a large mixing bowl, we're adding in 400 grams of all-purpose flour, 60 grams of white sugar, 1 gram of salt, and 7 grams of dried yeast. From there, grab yourself a whisk or rubber spatula and start mixing all the dry ingredients together until they're thoroughly combined. Next, we're going to add in 1 cup or 250 ml of warm water and mix that into the dry ingredients until it starts to form into a shaggy looking dough, which should only take 1 or 2 minutes. Give the dough a quick knead in the bowl until it starts coming together as one mass, and then we're going to dust our work surface with a light, even coating of all-purpose flour before turning out the dough. Now, because I still haven't bought a replacement dough hook for my KitchenAid, you already know what's happening next. We're going to continually knead this dough for a solid 10 to 12 minutes. At the start, it's going to feel quite tough and crumbly, but as you continue to knead this dough and develop the gluten, like just about any other bread, you'll see that it begins to smooth out, become softer, and by the end, you should be left with a light, elastic, and pliable ball of dough. Lightly coat a large bowl with some oil and then transfer the dough into the bowl, making sure to roll it around so that it's also lightly oiled. Cover this with a damp tea towel or some plastic wrap and allow the dough to prove for roughly 1 hour in a warm place or until it has doubled in size.
1 hour later.
After an hour or so, your dough should look something like this. It has grown to about twice its original size and it's filled with plenty of air, which we're going to ever so softly punch it into submission. Dust your work surface with a little bit of flour, turn your dough onto the floured surface and give it a little shake around to make sure that nothing's sticking. Gently pat and stretch out your dough into a large disc and then sprinkle over 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Gather the edges of the dough to the center and pinch them together to ensure that the baking powder doesn't spill out. After that, we're kneading the dough for another 2 to 3 minutes so that the baking powder is well incorporated. When you first start kneading it again, it'll feel like the dough won't want to stick to itself, but as you continue to knead it, it's going to come back together into a nice, smooth mass very quickly. Once the baking powder is well kneaded into the dough, we're going to divide it into equal sized portions. To make the giant steam bun, I'm going to divide the dough first into 6 equal portions, and then once that's divided, I'm going to be combining 2 of those pieces for our huge bun later on. Once the dough is portioned out, you'll want to cover them with some plastic wrap or a clean, damp tea towel to ensure that the dough doesn't dry out. Working with one ball of dough at a time, we can now make some red bean buns. To do this, we're first going to roll the dough until it's a nice smooth ball. Flatten the dough ball into a disc using your hands or a rolling pin and ensuring that the edges are a little bit thinner than the center of your dough. Next, we're taking a chilled red bean paste and spreading out about 1 tablespoon's worth of the paste into the regular sized bun. Make sure to get this layer nice and even, leaving a little bit of room around the edges. Now it's time to seal this bun up. To make this easier for you guys to see, I'm cupping the dough with both of my hands, which may look a little bit awkward, but essentially what you want to do is gather the edges of the dough together and begin pinching all the dough shut to ensure that it's nicely sealed. Once the dough has been pinched together, give it a good twist to make sure that it's nice and secure, and then you're going to want to place the bun seam side down on your work surface and give it a few rolls around the counter to make sure that it's really nice and secure. After you've done all that, you should be left with a nice smooth top on your bun like this. At this point, we're just going to place our little round boy onto a baking tray and keep it covered while we make the remaining buns. Now, if you want to make a massive one like I'm making today, you're going to be using the exact same process, except you're obviously going to need more dough and more filling. For the giant steam bun, I used 2 portions of the divided dough and roughly 4 tablespoons of the filling, but I'd suggest using about 5 or 6. Also, make sure that you're not doing what I am here with bringing the edges together. You can see that there are various areas where the filling is getting in between the edges when I'm sealing the bun, which will result in the red bean paste being spread throughout the bun rather than having a big pocket in the center. Once you've finished filling all of your buns, you want to cover them with some plastic wrap or a damp tea towel and allow them to proof for another 20 minutes.
20 minutes later.
When they've finished their second proofing, they should look something like this, a little bit bigger and just oddly satisfying to look at. Or at least, I think they're really nice to look at. Maybe I'm just a weirdo. Either way, we're now going to place each of our proofed red bean buns onto a square of baking paper before placing them into our steamer of choice. I'm using a bamboo steamer in this video, but feel free to use whatever steamer you have available in your kitchen. Over on the stove, I have a saucepan filled with about 10 centimeters worth of simmering water, to which I'm going to add in 1 teaspoon of white vinegar. This won't impart any flavor to the buns, but it will help to keep the buns nice and white while they're steaming. Place your steaming basket of choice on top of the water, and now we're just going to let the buns do their thing. For the normal size buns, you'll want to let these steam over simmering water on a low heat for 15 minutes. As tempting as it may be, don't lift the lid during that time, just let them do their thing. Once the timer is up, turn off the heat and allow them to rest for an additional 5 minutes. After that, you'll be rewarded with this, a beautifully steamed, white, fluffy red bean bun. These are best enjoyed while they're still warm, so let's crack into this guy and have a look at that cross section. Beautiful. As for the taste, the bun itself is light and fluffy with a mild sweetness to it, and it pairs beautifully with the earthy sweetness of the red bean paste. But I'm sure you guys are waiting for me to make the big boy, so let's get to it. Now, because this bun is so big, it's obviously going to take more time to cook. Like before, we're placing the bun over a pan of simmering water, and this time we're letting it steam for 25 minutes. After 25 minutes, we're going to turn off the heat and leave the steam basket over the water while the bun rests for an additional 10 minutes. After that, allow me to show you guys the most ridiculously oversized red bean bun that I've ever made in my life. So needless to say, this thing is absolutely massive. Ignoring my complete lack of effort in my hair during filming, let's just appreciate that this bun is literally bigger than my face. Like I mentioned before, during the folding, a lot of the red bean paste was trapped between the folded edges of the bun when I was trying to seal it, so in terms of appearance and a satisfying cross section, this definitely didn't hit the mark. But I will say that as an eating experience, because the bun is so big, it actually turned out better having the red bean paste being more evenly spread throughout the bun, as it helped to make each bite more consistent, whereas having a massive pocket of sweet red bean paste in the center of this might have been a little bit too much. Just learn from my mistakes and do the folding properly like I did with the small ones if you want that big pocket of filling. As always my friends, thanks so much for watching today's episode. If you enjoyed it, let me know by dropping a like down below, and let me know in the comments what food from anime and other media you'd like to see in the future. Subscribe to the channel for a new episode every single week, and until then, pull up a chair, unfurl that napkin, and I'll see you in the anime kitchen. Cheers!